So the article for today is having a plan. This is probably the level up that I most value, to be honest. Just because it's let me just check something. Okay, everything seems to be working. Yeah, just because having a plan ties up every single decision that you make, every single play, and it gives sense and purpose to your actions. Okay, it's all fine and good in knowing what are the main heuristics for playing Magic. Like I should mulligan hand that doesn't have between 2 and 5 lands or something like that. That's an heuristic, yeah. But how does that fit into the plan? Does your aggro deck works with 5 lands in hand on your opening hand? Probably not, depending on what kind of aggro are you playing. If it's closer to the ground, that's really hard. So yeah, having a plan is probably the most relevant level up that you can have. Of course, it also develops on top of other level ups or other heuristics that can be useful for you. Just because the plans are built on top of your existing knowledge. So if you don't have enough knowledge on what this deck wants to do, what are its outs, what's the matchup look like, what does the matchup look like, you won't be able to formulate a plan that takes advantage of that. Okay, and I have here a note. Yeah, my top level up, and this is actually a reason for me to still be playing rogues, even though it has been, well, I don't play that much constructed, but still I really enjoy rogues because you essentially have 3 plans at the same time. It's you can win by card advantage, you can win by milling, and you can win by aggroing your opponent. And you dynamically switch between those during gameplay, and the deck is also very versatile to find some kind of answers to your opponent's threats. So I quite enjoyed the deck. It's a bit misunderstood, I believe. Right now, I think Martin Yuza has been pushing a few articles related to rogues. So there are some believers out there, and it's also one of the decks that has a very high ceiling of gameplay. What do I mean by that? If you practice enough with it, if you get to know what are its how does it work, how does it not, what kind of sequences should you be paying attention, when should you leave the counter up and not, depending on the matchup, all those things enable you to actually take much more from the deck than the average player would. Okay, I'm not saying that I do that, but I've been knowing I've been knowing some of those intricacies of the deck. So either way, having a plan, that's the article for today. Let's start by what is a plan. It's as I've talked previously, it's like a direction. It's an idea of what you want to accomplish, and the construction of the scenario. So what steps should be taken to actually take that plan into fruition, to materialize that plan. Of course, the plan is always directed to winning the game. And this is very important because sometimes you're just auto playing, like I play my land, I attack, I do all of that, but what is the plan? How are you winning this game? Is your opponent trying to go under your big creatures? What are they trying to do? How should you respond? So the plan is essentially always directed by how can I win this game? But it provides like the framework of how to reach that, right? What kind of steps should I take? Why do I need a plan? Well, that's it adds cohesion to your decisions. Essentially, it's like if you don't have a plan, as I was discussing, you will leave plenty of value in the table just because you're not playing optimally. Sometimes attacking your 2/2 into a 3/3 might be the valid plan because you're at 2 life and you need an out, and the only out is on bluffing that you have a spell that a combat trick that gives double strike or whatever, something like that. So sometimes you need to play to your outs, but essentially identifying the plan, it's a process that actually takes multiple stages. So generally speaking, you'll have you have a set of potential plans for you to winning the game, right? But you need to be constantly adjusting your main plan depending on how likely it is to succeed, right? And this goes from intuition, okay? Many people speak about probabilities, hard numbers, but those numbers are not hard at all, okay? Generally speaking, that is. You feel like sometimes it's like this. You feel like this path is the correct one or not, and then you redirect. There's a lot going on here. So narrowing the set of potential paths so that you know how can you actually win the game, and then pick at a given time, and we'll discuss how why changing the plan in the middle of the game can work for you. You try to maximize the one that or pick the one that maximizes your chances of winning, right? Then the author goes here into several examples that are very interesting, and I would definitely advise you to take a look into them. As always, you can have access to these articles via the articles command. There's a spreadsheet accessible to everyone with all these articles. And yeah, I would advise you to give another reading if you're interested in such a thing. So next. Yeah, exactly. So the author is essentially mentioning what I was mentioning. Is there's like you might be doing pursuing the actions that are common sense in Magic, that are typically correct. But if you don't have a plan that sticks, that brings those actions together, those decisions, that doesn't cut it. That doesn't cut it at high levels. Yeah, for example, and this is something that I'm currently working on because it's really crucial, I believe, in any high level Magic. It's knowing, for example, in how your deck matches up against your opponent's deck, and what are the critical cards that you need to answer, and what are or play around or whatever, and what are the key turns where those cards can come up or something else happens. Those two pieces of information, I believe, are very, very, very helpful, and you can gain them by studying strategy articles on some specific decks for some specific meta game or something like that, or also via practice and developing your own intuition on what happens in those situations. The default best play. Yeah, exactly. So what drives a plan can be completely different than what is the default best play in a vacuum, because you cannot play your creature that would make an additional 5 points of damage, because on your opponent's third turn they will likely play a card that is completely backbreaking for you, so you need to hold a counter for that for the third turn. So that I believe it's really crucial. A plan provides context, definitely. This is like it like provides a justification for what you're actually doing. Then Paulo and starts here with a specific example with like you have $50 and you toss a coin, heads you get an additional 50, tails you lose the 50. It all depends on the context, how much you value those $50 or the additional $50. If you really need $100 to survive, you'll probably take the bet. If you really need the $50 to survive, then you'll value things differently. If you don't value money at all, you might not even care about the challenge. So everything is contextual. Your plan should be contextual and should also provide context to your decisions, okay? Yeah, if you don't know the context, you cannot really evaluate how much the money is worth to you, because it's like down here there's an example on a 2/2. So how much do you value this 2/2? Should you attack into a 3/2? It all depends on what this 2/2 means to you, because it's essentially it. That's what it essentially is. It's a means to an end. You will look to achieve something with it, but what is that? Do you want to keep your opponent's board as clean as possible? Are you taking a more defensive position with it? Because you might even need to use that creature to shump block a 6/6 later. All of those are possibilities, but you should try to understand what is your end and how does this game piece fits in that plan. I had here some notes, I guess. Oh yeah, I had here a very interesting one. I think it's this having a plan. I think it's also one of the most relevant level ups for daily life, just because this is defining plans, deadlines, and expectations. They materialize the context, right? And sometimes, I really wanted to. Sometimes you feel like you really wanted to be the best Magic player that you can be, competing the professional level. But I also want to do another thing, and I also want to do another thing. Then I get confused and I don't know exactly what I'm trying to achieve. And sometimes later down the road I might feel, but I haven't achieved anything in this specific goal that I was pursuing. That's why having checkpoints and having like a plan, that's something that I try to do. It helps you gear and understand how your expectations measure up to reality. Can you actually achieve the things that you're setting up to do? Because you might just end up getting frustrated, right? If you don't have a plan on how to achieve that. An example is this plan that I showed a while back, actually. So this is something I'm not following strictly at all, but there are some stuff here that definitely provide me background. Like, I want to start training at 6:30 every single day. I also want to wake up at 7 every single day, so that I have 1 hour for my breakfast and whatever, and then I can start actually and planning the day, and then I can start actually doing something before getting into work, for example. This is like a baseline. It establishes to me a framework for do I actually have time? Like, I need, if I want to grow in parkour, for example, I need to invest let's say 6 hours per week. Okay, do I have those time slots anywhere? What do I need to drop to be able to do that? It's all about weighting what you value the most, right? So that's something. Yeah, it's a means to an end. The 2/2, we already saw that, and yeah, something that is also very important for this discussion is so your plan does not only depend on your resources, and it also depends on what are the resources that your opponent has. What is their deck? What do they have in the board, for example. So there's this thing that I keep getting back to, that LSV mentions from time to time. So a level 0 player is like, you know what the effects of the cards do, and you know how to sequence your plays minimally. At least you know what's the main phase, what's the combat phase, what can you do in each. Then you actually, a level 1 player has a plan and actually knows what they're doing. But there are stages on top of that, but all depend on this baseline of having a plan, because the next one is based on the premise that your opponent also has a plan. So you need to take that into account. What are they trying to achieve? Again, we get back to that example where the turn 3 play from my opponent can be neck breaking if I'm not careful. So I'm recognizing that I have a human being in front of me, and they also think that they know what they're trying to do with the game. So that's something to take into consideration. Then a level 3 player knows that my opponent knows, or a level 3 player is someone that knows that the opponent is a level 2 player, so they also take into consideration what's our plan. So we can mislead them sometimes. That's very rare. Getting to be consistently playing at level 2 is already very challenging. So and more often than not, that's the thing that you should be doing, either way. For you and for your opponent, yes, of course. So we already reviewed that. So a plan depends not only on you, but also depends on your opponent, right? How do I know what my plan should be? So it depends on your resources, right? It depends on your resources and actually your opponent's resources too. That's why sideboarding is also very, very relevant, right? It's an opportunity to adjust the resources so that your plan can be more consistent, or you maximize the chance of success with a given plan that is more suitable for the matchup, right? What type of deck your opponent is playing, besides what's your deck, what's in your opening end. Your opening end is very, very important to determine what's your early game and how are you set up for the mid game, right? If you go to generally speaking, you go into the mid game, but it depends, right? If you're aggro, you want to have your opponent into a low life total, so having a burn spell or something is very useful in the mid game. But you don't want too many on your opening end because you don't have that recurrent source of damage that creatures provide, right? But again, it all depends on whatever the context is. What's in your opening end, what's in your deck, how the game has progressed so far, because sometimes your opponents might be doing stuff that like they might be playing too cautiously with an aggro deck or something like that. So you can use that information. They might be, you might have noticed that on game 1 they were playing around a board wipe. So in game 2 you might actually go down on board wipes because your opponent will be playing around them either way. Depending on if you're on the play or you're on the draw, all of that should be taken into consideration. Yeah, so mulligans, decisions, as I was discussing, it's you should look into your opening end, and it should fill the role of getting you through the early game without falling too far behind, depending on your plan. And set you up well for the mid game, a time in which you already have drawn several different cards, all that stuff. So because if you think a bit about it, so the mid game starts more or less turn 5, something like that. Let's use turn 5 as an example. That and why this is like the mid game, because you stop or you slow down on curving out with your spells, generally speaking. And why is this important? This is the stage where you start having access to almost as many lands as you had in your opening hand. Okay, so because up to turn 4 you've drawn 4 additional lands, so versus 7 cards that you had on your opening hand. So what you have, most of your resources are still determined by your opening hand, right? Yeah, so mulligan decisions are very crucial in Constructed, and it's there are other concepts inherent to these decisions, but I feel like the most important thing that you should take into consideration is how well it will set you up for the mid game, and how well does it work for your early game. That's essentially it. Imagine, yeah, and how does one set up a plan? You as mentioned previously, you try to imagine how do you actually win this game, and then you take a few steps back and try to see, okay, what actions, what decisions will drive me into this late game, into this winning situation, into the goal of my plan, right? Think about what you can do to make this scenario. Yeah, exactly. So think about what actions can you do to make the plan come to fruition. There's something really important here. So it's important not to confuse this thing of having a plan that's in which the goal is to win. So sometimes if you're ahead, your plan, and this is also important when you're switching gears, right? If you're way ahead, or if you're ahead of your opponent and winning in a couple of turns or something like that, your mindset should switch to, okay, how do I lose this game? You should try to ask yourself, and these are just examples of what can drive your plan, right? How can I not lose this game? Alternatively, when you're playing from behind, you are essentially playing to win. You're playing on smaller chances, on play to your out, right? That's a common expression. What can you actually do to take a win out of this losing situation? And if you're a control deck, you might actually be quite comfortable playing from behind for a little while, because you will not let your opponent get too far ahead of you in the early game, and after the resources run out, you will still have plenty of game, and you're planning on playing from behind for a while. So this should also drive the plan. I added it here because I feel like it's definitely a very important level up to take into consideration in the light of having a plan. And yeah, that's about it. Then there's this example which I found elsewhere too, but I think it's very relevant. So your plan should, as we discussed previously, should be informed by what your opponent is doing, right? And let's say that your opponent is trying to ramp, right? They're trying to ramp with their deck, and but you have a control deck too. So they're trying to ramp and you have a control. So hey GeForce, welcome. I guess I have Nightbot issues now. Oh, that's great. So yeah. By the way, GeForce, today we're reviewing an article on having a plan, not only in Magic, but as well as in life, but more focused in Magic. Yeah. So let's say then we're at this matchup, control versus ramp. and the question is, okay, should I remove the ramp pieces from my opponent's board, or should I just hold off the answers for their actual payoffs for ramping? Generally speaking, in this situation, you're more likely to be benefited from holding your answers to your to the opponent's payoffs for ramping, right? Just because if your plan already considers getting into the late game, so at the late game, your opponent will also have as much access to mana as they want. So by cutting the ramp, you're just delaying a bit the inevitable, right? Them having access to whatever pieces of payoff that they might want. But the thing is, in other situations, you might not have enough answers for your opponent's threat. So, and you have like an aggro deck or something. So you, in those situations, you should probably bolt the bird, as the saying goes, right? Because you're delaying your opponent as much as possible for you to be able to win the game before they get into a situation where they have access to all the mana that they want. So this is just an interesting example. Yeah, and related to this, the more abstract concept here involved is you should try to think about how your answers line up with your opponent's threats, or how the value that you can get out of cards aligns with what your opponent is trying to do, right? So this is very important because, again, using the same scenario, you just have a few removal spells, your opponent has a few ramp cards, but they also have some significant payoffs for ramping that you cannot address with your removal spells, right? In this situation, well, my answers do not line up profitably against my opponent's threat, so I should use them on the birds, on the ramping, and try to take an advantage from there. Like the control deck, they might have many more answers than the opponent has threats, so they, generally speaking, are preferred in such a spot. But it also depends on if your opponent has answers to your threats, so you should also have ways to circumvent that. But I don't want to fall. Wait, I don't want to fall too deep on that subject. But still, I think it's very relevant to understand these sort of things. Then again, some examples here. Then there's this interesting take that might seem obvious to some of you, but there's this game from Tomohiro Saito, where Saito is being the aggressive one, and the opponent attacks with a smaller guy, like into his big creature, like trying to bluff a combat trick or whatever, and it doesn't even think about blocking. He had a removal, like in a way that he could have a 2-for-1 when the opponent tries to pump their creature or whatever. So he has that possibility of getting a 2-for-1 very easily, okay? And this opponent is falling into that stage, but he doesn't even think of blocking. He ignores the attack because his plan at that moment of the game was to be the aggressor, to lower the life total of the opponent. And how could he lose? Again, taking back the loop to what we discussed above. How can he lose? The opponent just puts a huge creature on the board that stalls the game and makes him and turns the game around, for example. So that's the moment where he actually needs the removal spell, right? To keep on pushing damage. That's his plan. So having a plan is really important to know what you can actually do. The default play would be to block. If the opponent uses a combat trick, you just get a 2-for-1, right? And so much value out of a play. But that's sometimes that valid, it's not the thing that gets you to win the game. And there are plenty of situations where that happens. A plan that is unlikely to work is still better than no plan. This is definitely true. Again, it gets back to that saying, playing to your outs. So if you need to rely on a top deck situation, if you need to rely on decking your opponent, on milling them out or something, having your opponent stumble, all of those are valid plans. That's why you should not, generally speaking, concede too early in a match, right? Even if you're losing for a ton, you might have some outs, okay, out of that situation. So you should try to pursue that, even if it seems the most risky thing, like attacking with your creatures when your opponent has as you dead on the swing back or something like that. You need, if you're playing too far behind and you need to play to your outs, generally speaking, you need to play much more. You need to make much more risky plays. Okay. Moving on, switching plans. I think this is the last section of this article, and again, this is a real gem, I think. The thing about switching plans is, again, understand what's the foundation for you to have a plan. If you have a good understanding of that, and those foundations switch, so now your assumptions are completely different because your opponent played a Wrath or something. Now you need to adjust somehow. You should try to, based on how the foundations changed, build a new plan on top of that, okay? So your plan is dependent on the factors that drive that plan. Understanding those factors and not simply read a deck guide and just, okay, this deck just mills, okay, that's what I'll do, and just focus on milling or attacking or whatever. So generally speaking, decks are not that single-minded, okay? So there's some wiggle room on how you play them, and you should take that into consideration. So if as the circumstances change, your plans should also change. This is also something a bit related. I had some notes above on this, and as you probably notice, the concepts keep getting back and around, depending on what your depending on what article you're reading, right? Because having a plan, it implies many other level up concepts that you should also take into consideration. And one of them that I keep on getting back to is this problems versus circumstances. And what is this? So problems are things that you have are actionable, so you can impact them significantly, and circumstances are just the constraints of the world that essentially condition the type of decisions that you can make. So the circumstances at a given matchup, for example in Magic, is your opponent is playing aggro, so that's already conditioning the set of plans that you can have. Then you draw your opening hand. That's also circumstances, right? But there's also a problem lying behind, which is, okay, I can mulligan, so I can do something about my opening hand. But there are implications of that, which are the circumstances. You'll have essentially one less resource each time you mulligan. So there's this distinction, and both of these things should drive your plan. So the circumstances will initially narrow down the set of plans that you have available, and then you should also identify, okay, what are the problems? That is, what kind of decisions can I make to mitigate the problems that this plan can have? And I think this is this mental model of problems versus circumstances is really helpful when designing your game plans. And even in life, for example, I started streaming because of the circumstances imposed by the pandemic, right? I just felt like, okay, let's do something with my time that enables me to learn something new, that enables me to meet new people, to develop my interests, all those amazing things. And yeah, so based on those circumstances, I faced then a series of problems, like I need to get better in Magic. I need to have my setup, to get a monitor to be able to effectively interact with my audience on chat. All those things are problems that, as time progressed, I was taking care of them. But this was like, there's that saying, right? When life throws you lemons, you do lemonade. That's a bit the mindset. If you you play according to your circumstances and focus your energies on addressing the problems that you can actually influence, right? So TLDR, a plan is a direction that guides all your decisions in a match and binds them together, makes them have some cohesion. This plan might involve trying to misguide your opponent at some point, for example, with a bluff attack. It is whatever. If it's a stepping stone that you need to accomplish your goal of winning, that's something that you probably need to do. A plan depends mostly on the matchup and what resources each player has access to in a particular game. Of course, there's work that comes before this, which is like studying the metagame, trying to predict the metagame, right? Where you try to already come up with a set of resources that will enable to have the best plans against what's generally speaking out there. To find a plan, think, oh, this is Christmas music. This is so funny. Let me change things up. Let's put some EDM. Sure. Okay. Nice. Let's open the dance floor. To find a plan, think of what the game looks like when you win it, and then try to get to that scenario. So again, identify your goal and design a plan that gets you into that goal, right? But not only, it's not the thing here is you won't. The goal here is not for you to picture yourself winning the game, like getting off your table and just celebrating. No, that's not. It's to picture in what game state do you win the game, right? For example, using rogues, the rogues example, I was getting really aggro to my opponent, but then they remove all my thought thieves or something like that. Then I have ways to take them back from the graveyard or not? But I have I have a crab on the battlefield and another crab in my hand. So, and I look into my opponent's deck and they have 20 cards left, their library, I mean. So, okay, now probably I imagine myself winning via milling. So then I draw a card, it's a Fabled Passage, that's great. Okay, so I play my crab, play Fabled Passage, hold the counter for their next turn to prevent them from removing my crabs, and then on my next turn I eat another land drop and I win the game or something like that, right? So imagining the what you need to do is the best thing. Imagining what board state gets you to the win is the most important thing, I believe. And because that, again, you try to understand what decisions drive you to that stage. If the only way to win is by following a plan that is unlikely to work, then you should do that. No matter how unlikely it is, there are plenty of games that are won because someone played to their outs and did not just do the standard plays. Standard, like not the format, but common sense, I mean. A plan is based on factors that will change during the game, so make sure to adapt your plan as well. Again, there are powers changes during the game. Sometimes a deck, if it gets into the late game, has complete dominance over the opponent's deck. So the aggro deck plays completely different in that stage of the game, or doesn't play essentially. And just a final note, a bit regarding plans, but I think it's very important to mention this. If things go bad, like you forgot to, you did a misplay, let me just lower a bit the music for myself, otherwise I cannot hear my own thoughts. If you did a misplay, if your opponent got you with a combat trick, whatever, remember that at every point of the game you're allowed to, without judgment and without judging your abilities, to just start again. This is a concept that is talked a lot in meditation, but yeah, it's definitely true. You are allowed to start again, to just let the bad feelings flow through you instead of holding them tight and rummaging on them. That's very typical. You're allowed to let them go. Don't think about the past. Just okay, I'm resetting, and from this moment onward I can focus on what I'm actually doing, and I can design a plan given the current board state and adjust accordingly. And sometimes if you do a mistake, think about it as playing in hard mode, right? Okay, now given this mistake, how can I actually adjust? Think of it as a game, because it is a game, okay? A very interesting one, but it's still a game. Yeah, this is related to meditation. I also have some interesting, or at least an interesting channel point reward related to that. Which is like you do a 30 seconds exercise where you try to recenter yourself and let those bad feelings flow through you. I truly hope that you learned something from the article today, because I sure did. So if you want to find the link for it, it is in the About section just below the video. If you enjoyed this kind of content, make sure to leave a like, to subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell icon so you know when the next one comes up. Also, let me know in the comment section down below what are you working on, or what do you want to work on to take your game to the next level. I also stream on Twitch, so if you want to interact with me live, head over to twitch.tv/DiogoJapinto. We're building a truly awesome community in there, and we would love to have you around. Thank you for joining, and see you next time. Planeswalking out!